Hey there everyone, I'm painting a pepper today, starting out with a cube shape as my basis to get this pepper drawn onto my paper just right. So 2-point perspective, overhead view, so lower than the eye line. There's the cube. Let's start blocking in pepper shapes within that cube. Peppers are essentially a squarish shape with lots of rounded corners and edges and protrusions, and we'll use that cube shape and let the pepper extend outside the cube shape with the round edges and the shapes, the bulbous top right up there around the stem, that round bottom, and we'll get that sketched in here. Working out the basic shapes first, I'm going to start refining the sketch, blocking in some of the shadows, the darker areas, the planes that I see within the planes, refining the edges, working on that stem, little shadow on the stem there. I'll work on the shadow. This one's going to be fun because we have those yellows and oranges, reds, and even some blues and violets in the shadow. So as soon as we get all of the highlights kind of indicated and the sketch ready, we'll start color blocking. Dropping in a mixture of just simple orange. It could be a cadmium orange, cadmium yellow I mean. Mix in a little red with it. Or if you just simply have some yellow and red mixed together to create your orange. It's more of a yellow orange here. Throw a little of that color into the background, breaking the edge of the pepper, dropping in some darker colors. This is very wet. It's a wet on dry, and then I'll come back in while the paper is wet and introduce other colors with some wet on wet techniques. This is a Strathmore 400 paper, so it's going to stay wet. So I'll have a lot of time to drop in other colors to create a more color complex form while it's still wet. Little reds into the darker areas. As you can see, it's very wet and that color is spreading. At this point, it doesn't really matter. We'll work in layers of other details later. Put a little of that red into the tabletop surface that the pepper is sitting on. Now it's dried. Drop a little more of that red in. We're finding a little more saturation and contrast now. Finding specific shapes and forms. Going after the planes on the side of that front plane. On the edges. The paper isn't 100% dry, but it's still staying pretty much where I put it. So now I'm coming in and feathering out the edges, letting those colors mix a little better. All right, looking for some highlights now. Just picking bouncing between highlights and more saturation. Reflected light on that lower portion. Alright, so yeah, just bouncing around, picking highlights, adding a little more contrast in. It's very wet at this point. Getting that color modulation, that surface quality to the pepper. And as the pepper dries, I'm moving over. I mixed up a nice violet color, red violet. I'm going to work in the shadow. Just going to drop in that color, feather it out. It's going to be redder towards the outer edge. Move a little more of a violet color in underneath the pepper. Violet's a nice contrast color to the orange. Everything's very wet. The colors are going to mix nicely. A little more red in there. Get that edge right up against the edge of the pepper. Then drop in a little green, blue-green. So wet, all those colors are going to mix nicely. Little dry brush, letting that color come outside the edge of the shadow. Just for a little visual interest, get that paper texture. Drop a little more red in on the bottom. And then while that's drying, I'm going to introduce that red into the darker areas on the pepper. It's dried enough. I can start dropping in some of the colors there. You can see it's still wet. It's still spreading a bit. So it's still fairly active. And if it doesn't spread enough, you can always just feather it out with just water. Painting with a round, number 4 round it looks like. I'll lose the bottom edge there with that dark red. We're definitely into stage 2, looking for shapes, adding saturation, defining various planes. If it's too sharp, I'll feather it out. A little divot there on the front plane of the pepper. Get some of those darker shadows introduced. Shadow shapes within the shape. Let the color spread. It's a violet color, kind of a blue violet. Gives you that contrast. And as the pepper shape is drying, I'm going to come in and work on greens for the stem. Just drop in the basic green local color. Get the shapes just right. Let it dry, and then we can come in. I have a finer round brush, probably a number 2 brush. I'm going to paint in the shadow side on the stem, a dark green for the shadow side. Come right up against the edge of the pepper. Again, this is a good exercise, just working with still lifes, objects, right? Just everyday objects, just paint anything. and paint everything, and it doesn't matter. And your skills will grow so that no matter what you paint, it'll look good. And you throw a frame and a mat on it, it'll look great on the wall. Even though it's a simple, still life subject, something that you have mastered, your skills have grown to a point that you can take an everyday, ordinary object, make it look great, make a piece of artwork out of it. Going around, introducing a little more structure. Still a little wet, but now I am painting with line, adding definition. Those interior line cuts from one outer edge coming on into the inside of the form. Adding structure, defining those shapes up at the top. Yeah, it's still a little wet up there. We'll just bounce around, add the structure where I need it. Working with that dark orange. Again, finding structure and shape, starting to paint a little more detail, softening edges, getting rid of some of those very white spots, little textural marks right there, just starting to define some of the qualities of the stem on that pepper. And there was a little glaze, intensifying color with an orange. So just dropping on more color. And that is the key to glazing, is to drop that color onto the shape, into the space where you want it, and leave it alone and don't fuss with it. Coming in with a damp brush again, I'm going to pick some highlights, reflected light on the lower portion on the edge of that pepper, right against that dark red line that I painted. Just softening that little spot right there a little bit. Right up on there where the lighting is catching, right on the tip of that round top. And again, it's wet from the glaze, so it's going to be easy to activate. Highlight on that edge, right there on the right side of the pepper, right on the rim of that little protrusion. Softening that edge. More definition from that left side to the right side. And that top is very wet, so I'm going to just pick that out. Create that highlight. The shadow has a little bloom in it, introducing that really red against that blue violet, and it left a little bloom. And in the past, that would have drove me nuts, but I've just learned to leave those kind of things alone, just to attribute them to happy accidents, just let it be what it is. Picking highlights on the stem now. Get some textural components, some cross contour marks on that stem to give it a sense of roundness, of being more cylindrical. Just little dibs and dabs, little highlights here and there. And that's just with water. Just picking, reactivating, and picking with water. Really going after that spot right there. That's a very hot highlight. And I'm picking with a very small, I think that's a 1/4 inch flat brush. I think I've mentioned it in past videos. I started out painting with watercolor as a flat brush artist. Still trying to accustom myself to working with mops more. I work with rounds, and rounds are nice detail brushes where you really want to get that fussy detail. And as I've said in previous videos, I'm a recovering fuss butt realist, so I have a proclivity for wanting to paint a lot of fussy detail that I'm constantly fighting and learning to let go of. And I know that is a standard problem for a lot of watercolor artists. A lot of my students up at the university have that same issue. And I like to tease them about it, mainly because I'm one of them. So yeah, just working around, adding structure, a little more definition here and there, painting line, edges. And switching over, and now I'm going to drop in the hot highlights with some Pro White, adding that jewelry in, all the bling, all the little hot points of reflected light. So whenever you see me pulling out the Pro White, you know the watercolor piece is coming to a close, and it's looking pretty good. Drop a little bit of that onto the stem. So anyway, yeah, start with a cube. Use that cube just as a basis for where you can position and work the shapes of the pepper. Break the edge of the cube, come in and outside of it. Just use it as a rough guideline. Oh, dropping in a little more of a glaze, a red glaze on that front plane. Sketch it up, block it in, block in your color, picking out some more highlight. Find those shapes, create that color modulation, that color complexity, and then come in and paint your detail, and bam, you have a completed pepper. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a try. Peppers are fun to paint. I'm going to be painting another one. This one's going to be a pepper based on a cone shape, so watch for that coming up. Give me a like and a subscribe. I appreciate you watching. And drop me a comment if you get a chance. See you in the next video.